Hi, and welcome back to another episode of All Things Data. Last week we talked to you a little bit about document intelligence, and this week we're going to follow that up with all the uses that AI could bring to your organization. Now, without further ado, let's get to the question and answer.
So Victor, tell me what AI is all about.
That's a very loaded question. Really, AI is many things, but it's probably not as strong or prevalent, really as intelligent as most people would think. Many people may think of AI in the world of Terminator, where there's this wonderful AI robot who's coming from the future and who's much smarter and stronger than all of us. So that's sort of the AI that a lot of people get scared about, and realistically, we're nowhere near that kind of AI. I mean, that's really a super intelligent AI. A lot of companies are trying to get to general intelligence. So having an AI that is generally smart and can be learning for itself. But realistically, in almost all applications, save for very few specialized, usually robotic or autonomous kind of applications, the AIs that we have are very specific. So they are literally meant to understand whether an outcome could be possible or might happen and have some confidence about it, as well as determining what something might be. So whether that's an image or some text or really like an entirety of a document or corpus, that's usually called classification. So that's generally the sophistication of AI that most organizations would actually be impacted by, is in that world, and not generally in the world of an AI that is learning better than humans and doing everything better than humans, because we're not there, obviously.
Wow. If a small company today that don't have AI and they are thinking of integrating this into their business, what would be the first step that they would take?
Well, if they've already bought in, if management has decided that they've bought into the idea that we want to be an AI-focused company, if what they're just simply looking for is like that rubber stamp of we have some AI, in the easiest possible way, deploying a chatbot is probably the lightest touch way that you can get to AI. A lot of people consider and believe that chatbots, there's a new word for them, conversational AI. What it is a level of automation, really, rather than like a novel, amazing, artificial intelligent bot. Because most chatbots are still in the world of you have to basically feed them what the interaction is going to be like and how to answer specific questions, and possibly versions of those questions or iterations of those questions, much rather than having the bot understand language and then be able to do things for you. And there are bots that can do that as well. They're just slightly more expensive. We have one of those bots where, using another platform to create its brain, you can then have the bot answer any and all questions and generate the speech for you, so that you're actually having legitimately real sounding interactions with a near sentient level language representation.
Mm-hmm. If I'm a company who is more advanced and I want to do more with my data, because large organizations have an abundance of data that most of the time they don't know what to do with it, what kind of options would they have with AI?
Oh, okay. That's actually a really good question. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be a larger company, but just a company with more history. A startup lacks the ability to have created data for years and years and years. Whereas, a company, even if they're still medium-sized or even small, that's been around for several years, likely has some historical data. And they probably have this historical data in several places. They're likely to have it in engineering, operations, sales, marketing, all across the board. What AI can do with historical data is it can really get to the heart of determining whether an outcome might be possible, and within some certainty. As managers of work and people and projects, we look at risk, right? So we inherently understand that there's some tolerance where I'm like, okay, there's some risk to this project, but the benefits are really good. So knowing that internally and probably not quantifying it, I make a decision based on this. It's the same thing with AI. Given a lot of historical data, it can replace sort of your gut feel for that. So rather than saying, well, it's possible that it will rain tomorrow or something like that, you can actually do it based on prior events and have a probability that it will rain. That ends up giving you sort of a risk tolerance of sorts. And that ends up being a binary classification or a binary inference of sorts. There's the possibility to extend that beyond binary where you get into multi-class. And really, there are many categories that this might fit into. So in the world of our document intelligence, when you're classifying a document, when you first ingest it, you may want to know whether that document is an agreement or a memo or an invoice or a purchase order. That will help you treat that document in a certain way down the line. You classify it first, and then you probably do some other work on that stuff. And then generally what most people run into in early stages of AI is regressions. So that's machine learning. So taking historical pasts and applying largely a function that tells you whether it's likely to happen again. So imagine in the world of rain again, so historical data for weather, you're thinking, okay, well, based on all of the historical data, and there's a lot of data in weather, is it likely to rain tomorrow based on all the signals we've seen? And, your weather forecast is not completely right all the time. But again, that's that probability mix. So you're running a regression to try to figure out if something that's happened in the past may happen into the future as well. So those are the lighter touches of machine learning. So starting to get into AI. And then if you're much more sophisticated or have the engineering chops and data science chops, you may do some deep learning, some neural networks.
In the world of operations and finance, what are the ways where AI can benefit their day-to-day operations?
Going back to a lot of the types of AIs that most people would look to have, the type that fits best here is regression, unless you are a more sophisticated bank, insurance company, whoever you are, organization that would actually have neural networks, because then you can get into some very odd behaviors and still predict those. The world of regression for operations and finance allows you to forecast. And that's something that most people and most organizations, especially at the management and board level, want to be able to do. They want to be able to look at the data, and if you've seen, the graphs of all of your high school math classes, there's a line that goes through it. There's a way to describe that line in a function. And basically you're saying, given that time moves forward, if I plug a new time variable into this function, I'm trying to predict the outcome of whether that is me doing more in this campaign, me giving it more money, me changing some variables around. What can I move to make this outcome better for me? So in operations and finance, you're very often looking at how can I improve the way that I drive revenue, and also how can I possibly reduce cost by changing some of these levers.
As an organization that is trying to drive sales and reduce churn, what are ways AI can impact its day-to-day?
Okay, some of the earliest and not easiest, but the getting to know data science and AI modeling techniques are generally in the world of sales and marketing and retention. And that's because there's a lot of data sets that have been publicly available where data scientists go to look for data sets. So you can get true or at least cleansed sales data, basket data, and a bunch of stuff about, oddly, grocers, one of the big ones who have this data out. And it's often also from the loyalty programs. So a lot of people scratch the surface of these. In terms of sales and marketing, really you want to know whether or not your campaigns are working and are benefiting your revenue, your bottom line. You want to look at periods where that did happen better than other periods and try to, if you're not strictly doing machine learning and you're trying to describe it, you're going to look to do sort of an exploratory look at these data sets and try to figure out which variable actually moves the needle more. And if you're really just looking to forecast, just as you are in operations or in finance, you'd be looking at, okay, well, if we run the same campaigns as last year based on the reality of this year, will we get a lift in sales, a drop in sales, or whatnot? Now, looking at something like loyalty programs and size of basket and average customer spend, you can start to chart sort of what an average customer transaction looks like. And you can also start seeing early indicators of when and how people will churn from your offering to your competitor's offering. And you usually know that generally from the loyalty programs more so than anything. And especially if you marry that with POS, if you're the kind of retail organization that would have POS and loyalty. Based on the use of your loyalty program and the size of cart, all married with the length of which that customer may have been a customer of yours, you can start to see patterns. And in machine learning, that feeds right into a regression or into a neural network even, that can really start to paint the picture as to when and how somebody may leave. And if you get really sophisticated, you can even get to a prescriptive model where you also start looking at not just that they may leave, but now that you know they may leave, and like a cohort of 10% of your customers may leave in the next quarter, the prescriptive model may actually tell you, how can I intercept them leaving and put the right thing in place so that they don't leave and they don't churn? Because that's really the purpose of knowing if somebody's going to churn. It's not to know ahead of time and not do anything. It's really, how can I now interact with this customer and ensure that they remain my customer? And that's one thing that, you know, when you get into some sophisticated modeling, you can get to a prescriptive AI.
Very cool, very insightful as well too, with all the information that you have provided on AI and data science. Before we wrap this up, I know your company, you guys have great products like Apogee. Could you tell us a bit more information on what you guys have been working on?
Sure. I guess in the path to AI, many companies, rather than having the talent and the wherewithal or the innovative spirit to build all of the AI solutions they would require, they may only focus on the very specific AIs that will, again, drive sales, reduce cost. And usually drive sales is the big one, right? So going to the world and looking at companies who are doing AI as their only thing, such as 1000ml, you end up finding places that do things like chatbots, that do things like regressions, that do all kinds of AI. And for us, we've chosen to really stick in the narrow lane of natural language processing. So AI, but for language. The way that we've done it is we made a system that basically can ingest any content. So whether that is a regular document, a fax document, something that's been scanned, whatever, any of those, or if it comes from, you know, your ERP system or possibly your email system. So to us, it's content, right? And even a web page is content. We're able to ingest it all. And then our AI, basically our machine, understands all of the context that is in the content itself and makes sense of it. So then when you try to interact either through search or through possibly, if you wanted to deploy this as a chatbot in a way, it allows you to do all kinds of contextual real searching of documents. So a good example is we recently did a pilot with the government of Ontario for the business sector, where they were all sort of the customers of business sector. So, you know, entrepreneurs and you know, lawyers and accountants mostly were confused as to how to get to the right place for the help they needed. And also the problem was exacerbated by the fact that the government likes to keep all of its content around for a very long time and just place an archive message or tag on some part of that content. So if it's a web page, maybe it's at the bottom or top or whatever, which then leads you to going down a rabbit hole of looking for programs that you may qualify for, doing a lot of work for them, only to realize later that they no longer exist or aren't funded or whatever. So we built a navigation tool, and the way that they wanted to use it was through our chatbot So that chatbot basically allowed any business user to have questions that it would ask our chatbot, and then have our chatbot surface all the applicable programs, forms, and information therein. And then obviously, send them also a report at the end that allows them to have a summary of all of that work. So that was one really nice example of what we did. The other part of work that we're doing, which is very nice, is we tie right into ERP systems. Many organizations have a lot of documents that are fed into those ERP systems that relate to some client, and that sort of intelligence that is in those documents ends up getting lost and just stored somewhere, rather than all of the data that should have been pulled out of those documents being put into the ERP system so that it can augment the intelligence that the ERP system can then report to you on. So what we do is we become a part of the pipeline with the same product, just a different way to interface to it. And your documents can largely come into your organization, pass through our system, and augment your ERP system automatically with very, very, very little error, much less error than, regular data entry, which is how people would get it in there. And it's at a cost that is less than, your typical resource would cost you for data entry. And we have many ways where Apogee can interface with an organization, and we have many products that are built around Apogee that end up being super useful to small, medium, and large organizations and the enterprise.
Sounds like you guys are doing a lot of great work from small to medium and even the government as well too. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
Very cool.
we surely want to serve as many people with the right kind of AI, and we're not shy to tell people that we're not the right company or this is not the right AI for them. We want them to spend their money and get real value because of these projects. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. All right. So thanks again for tuning in to All Things Data. Today we talked all about AI and how it can affect your business and what kind of AI businesses can rely on to drive value today. Tune in again next week when we'll be talking about more things data on All Things Data.